Fair housing refers to a set of laws, regulations, and policies designed to prevent discrimination in housing-related activities. The primary goal of fair housing laws is to ensure that all individuals have equal access to housing opportunities and are not subjected to discriminatory practices based on certain protected characteristics. These laws are intended to promote housing equality and eliminate discrimination in the housing market. Fair housing laws can vary from country to country and from state to state within the United States. It's essential to be aware of the specific laws and protections that apply in your jurisdiction to understand how fair housing is enforced and what practices are prohibited. Fair housing plays a crucial role in promoting equality and combating housing discrimination. Real estate professionals should know how the Fair Housing Act and the Equal Credit Opportunity Act work to provide equal opportunity to housing and fair, unbiased access to financing for all potential home buyers. It's important for real estate professionals to have detailed knowledge of the Fair Housing Act and Equal Credit Opportunity Act and how it can help their business. Real estate professionals can practice NAR ethical principles in their business to enhance client outcomes and achieve increased success. The Fair Housing Act is a significant piece of federal legislation in the United States that prohibits discrimination in housing on the basis of certain protected characteristics. It is part of the Civil Rights Act of 1968. The Fair Housing Act was enacted to address and combat housing discrimination, ensure equal access to housing opportunities, and promote fair housing practices. Key aspects of the Fair Housing Act include 1. Protected characteristics. The Fair Housing Act prohibits discrimination based on several protected characteristics. These characteristics include race, color, national origin, religion, sex, familial status, and disability. Over time, amendments and court decisions have expanded the scope of protection to include characteristics such as gender identity and sexual orientation in some jurisdictions. 2. Prohibited practices. The Act makes it illegal for individuals, landlords, real estate agents, mortgage lenders, and other housing providers to engage in discriminatory practices in housing-related activities. Some examples of prohibited practices include refusing to rent or sell housing, setting different terms and conditions for housing based on protected characteristics, providing false information about housing availability, and using discriminatory advertising. 3. Fair housing enforcement. The Fair Housing Act established the Fair Housing Enforcement Office within the HUD. This office is responsible for investigating and enforcing fair housing complaints. State and local government agencies also play a role in enforcing fair housing laws. 4. Private lawsuits. In addition to government enforcement, the Fair Housing Act allows individuals who believe they have been victims of housing discrimination to file lawsuits against alleged violators in federal or state courts. These lawsuits can seek damages and injunctive relief. 5. Reasonable accommodations and modifications. The Act requires housing providers to make reasonable accommodations and modifications for individuals with disabilities to ensure equal access to housing. For example, landlords may need to allow service animals or make physical alterations to accommodate tenants with disabilities. 6. Accessibility standards. The Fair Housing Act includes accessibility standards that apply to new multifamily housing construction. These standards ensure that certain features, such as accessible entrances, wider doorways, and accessible routes within buildings, are included to make housing more accessible to people with disabilities. 7. Affirmative fair housing marketing. Some housing providers and developers are required to take proactive steps to promote fair housing, including using inclusive advertising and marketing practices. 8. Exemptions. While the Fair Housing Act provides broad protections against housing discrimination, there are certain exemptions for specific types of housing, such as owner-occupied buildings with 4 or fewer units and religious organizations that provide housing for members. The Fair Housing Act is a vital tool in combating housing discrimination and promoting fair housing practices in the United States. It has been amended and expanded over the years to address new forms of discrimination and to strengthen its protections. Enforcement of the Act is crucial in ensuring that all individuals have equal access to housing opportunities regardless of their protected characteristics. Homeownership in America is a foundational pathway to developing long-term wealth and stability, but discrimination in housing and lending practices has denied this financial opportunity to millions of underrepresented and disadvantaged groups, racial and ethnic minorities throughout the history of the United States. The passage of the Fair Housing Act in 1968 officially ended the legal practice of redlining. Most of the neighborhoods that were targeted under these policies are still suffering from poverty and a lack of resources and development. Many experts believe that a major contributor to the immense wealth gap that exists between white families and black families in the United States is due to the practice of systemic housing discriminatory policies, such as redlining.